To keep me awake at night, and the same for the police. There's lots of youth out there doing things that we don't want them doing. So we've asked Associate Professor from Bond University, Terry Goldsworthy, to have a chat to us about the sorts of measures we need to implement and the things that the government are doing. Are they enough?
Well, the community is very, very angry, and it's taken taken the deaths of 4 innocent victims for this youth crime crackdown of the Labor government to actually happen. It's just them sitting on their hands at the moment. There's been 5 fatal stabbings since September 2019 just in Surfers Paradise alone. Something definitely needs to be done. And yesterday on the news, they said, OK, here are some of the rules. There'll be a reversing of the presumption of bail. I like this one. More responsibility on parents and guardians to make sure that all the rules are put in place. Trialling the GPS tracking systems 24 hours a day. They're saying for Hoons it'll be harder to get away with it. The consensus in the community is this is a little too late. Have a listen. This is Anastasia Palaszczuk and the Leader for the Opposition and a few other experts on what they have to say.
So there will be no ifs or buts. The fundamental principle of youth justice must be to protect the community from recidivist offenders, and we will write that into law. The community want us to do more, and that is exactly what we are doing.
Can steal your other car, you stupid grubby mum.
The elephant in the room, which is breach of bail, in my mind, is an error.
Now, Dr. Terry Goldsworthy, this is what he had to say on the news last night. He's an associate professor at Bond Uni and previously worked as a detective inspector. He knows his stuff.
You know, if we've got a presumption against bail, that's good, but it doesn't mean that they're not going to get out. And clearly, if we're going to be allowing for GPS trackers, the intention of the government is that these people will get out.
Dr. Terry Goldsworthy, thanks so much for joining us this morning. We do know it's too late, but are these new laws going to work?
Yeah, morning, Bridge. Look, you're right. I mean, this is a slow train wreck that's been coming for a number of years. I mean, the government's own web pages are full of data that shows that this problem is getting worse and very little is being done to stop it. So the announcements yesterday, I don't think will achieve very much at all. You've touched on a number of them. And, for example, the GPS trackers, we don't know whether all of the high-risk offenders will get them or just some of the high-risk offenders. We don't know how they're going to be monitored. We know that with the DV trackers, there was a problem with real-time monitoring. That hasn't been clarified. We know there's black spots in regional areas where the GPS trackers don't work. And the killer here is because we haven't implemented a breach of bail offence, if you are a police officer and you find Jimmy outside of his house at 10 o'clock at night with his GPS tracker, there's no offence.
Yeah, well,
Okay,
this is it, Doc, because, even with the GPS trackers, they've got to be charged. How many people are going to charge them? I've got a 14-year-old boy whose phone sits on about 5% every day, all day. They won't charge them, and plus they'll just cut them off. And if they cut them off, what do? Nothing. Because the bail conditions, they go, oh, well, get another one.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, Spider. I mean, you've got all these kind of conditions around their bail, but there's no consequence when you breach it. It's just... I just almost started laughing yesterday when I read the kind of announcements that they'd made and the seeking assurances from parents and guardians. I just don't know what that's meant to achieve. We know that 33% of the juveniles have had a parent who's been in jail, so someone who's been in the criminal system. We know that 21% of the juveniles have an unstable home environment anyway. So, what are those 50% of parents going to care about saying, oh, yes, it's all right, let Jimmy out, I'll look after him? When Jimmy runs rampant, breaking the houses, stealing cars, what's the comeback for the parent? There's absolutely none. I don't know why they're actually worrying about getting this kind of stuff.
Mate, if you've just joined us, we're talking to Dr. Terry Goldsworthy, an associate professor at Bonds Uni, about these law changes for youth justice and particularly with respect to bail. Mate, thanks for joining us. And Bridget, those grabs summed this up perfectly, and I think backed up Terry there when he says, why are we having these chats now? Like, everything that got said last night is common sense and should have been implemented many, many moons ago, and we wouldn't be having this chat, and maybe there'd be 4 people be alive. I reckon Australians just want one thing and one thing only: lock them up. There's nothing else. If you're in my day, if you were found sitting in someone else's car and you'd gone for what they called a joyride in those days, and we've got to stop using that word.
Yeah, but hang on. There's no room.
Let me finish. Build another building. I don't care. Use my tax money to build another joint that they go straight to. I'm sick of this presumption of innocence when you're sitting in someone else's car.
That's right.
Terry, what can they do what can they achieve when they stop talking about it? Or what's the first thing that you'd want them to do?
Well, the first thing is they need to focus, and we're not talking, people need to be clear, we're not talking about first-time offenders here. We're talking about the 10% that are committing 40% of the crime, or 44% of the crime. So a hard core of criminalised, reoffending young youths. So they need to be targeted through investigation, arrested. They need to be kept inside because we know that 80% of young offenders have used some kind of illicit substance. So we need to stop the cycle of offending, drug use, violence, etc. And you're only going to do that with this 10% by keeping them in detention. And you're exactly right. We haven't got capacity to do that at the moment. That is one of the issues the government, again, has not had the foresight to look at in terms of housing youths that need to be kept in detention. So we've had this government remove the breach of bail in 2015. There's a total focus on the detention being a last resort and ensuring that more and more youth offenders got bail at every opportunity. We've reaped the rewards of that kind of thinking, and we've seen it in the events of the past few weeks. And we're only now getting things entered into the Youth Justice Principles Charter, where there's a reference now going to be inserted that the community deserves to be protected from recidivist offenders. Like, why was that never in there in the start?
I know, I tell you, we could do the whole show and just keep you on because there's so much to get through. But Dr. Terry Goldsworthy, thank you. It must be extremely frustrating for you. You were on the front line. We appreciate your advice. We just can't understand how the Labor government can close a border in 24 hours, but they can't get all of these implementations in place. Let's hope for a brighter future and lock up the little turds, as my mother would say. Dr. Terry, thank you.
Thanks.
That's it for the podcast. There's loads of other episodes to check out here on the app or at triplem.com.au. And we're back with our radio show tomorrow morning from 5 on 92.5 Triple M.